Okay. We'll give it another minute then. Okay, perfect. Then I call this October 10th meeting of the Planning Commission to order. The agenda, we don't have a printed out updated agenda, but we know that there's, I didn't print it, I just made a note on mine, so. Do we approve the updated agenda? Adding the second item as the Fort Mill impact fee.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Public hearing for the rezoning changes has withdrawn.
Okay.
The item number 1 under new business has been withdrawn.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve the updated agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
That's fine, I made notes. All right, all in favor of approving the agenda? Opposed? Okay. All right, that passes. The minutes. Do we have a motion on the minutes? Any questions, concerns, comments? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? All right, that looks like that's unanimous. Old business, rezoning 22-18.
Good evening, everybody. This first item here is case 2218 for Ken Alexander, for Highway 57 in Clover, tax map number 561-0000-00037. This is the request to rezone a 5.3 acre parcel from GC to RUD. It's to allow the shipping container that's currently there to remain on the property. Shipping containers are allowed in properties that are zoned RUD and that are at least 5 acres in size, as long as they are located behind the primary residence and screened from view. And you should remember, we heard this case last month, and the request was to defer until the following meeting. I'll just go ahead and give you a brief overview just to remind you. The property is in Lake Wiley on 557. Single family house, you can see on the picture here where the shipping container is right here. Have to move it behind the house and screen it from view. This property here is relatively flat with no water features. Zoning for the area is mostly general commercial, GC. There is also some RMX 20 in the area and some RUD. Comprehensive land use plan shows this parcel here for neighborhood residential. It's just on the outside of a community center node, also located in the community infill area. And so that means for neighborhood residential, you would have medium density neighborhoods that allow a mixture of housing types. You can have some commercial at the intersection of major roads. It's also located within the community center, which has a range of commercial uses, as well as apartments and townhomes would be appropriate there. Staff recommends approval for the application here. It does not align with the comprehensive plan, but there is no change to existing use of the property. It's still going to be residential, and this also will eliminate the non-conforming status of that current property. Any questions from staff?
Yes. Just to confirm, it's going to RUD 1, or it's just RUD, or RUD 1?
RUD.
Okay. But RUD does not allow apartments or
That's
condos.
correct.
Okay. So the zoning would still prohibit anything other than single family?
That's correct.
Any further questions of staff? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second? Any further discussion? Okay. Unfortunately, I was not able to be here last month, so I'm not sure what the discussion on this was.
I'm afraid that all falls to me. So
Okay.
I had confusion about permitted uses and grandfathering and what was allowed, what was not allowed, what happened in recode that didn't happen in recode, and I just could not get my brain wrapped around this one last time. But since then, I've had time to get all that, and I'm all squared away. Thank you.
The only two things I had on this one were, we rezoned this from residential to, the current zoning, GC, right before the county went through and purchased right-of-way to widen that road, which made it quite a bit more expensive to purchase. And the reason we, as a commission, agreed to do that was that there was gonna be a restriction not to allow apartments. And then it went before council, and council approved it for the exact same reason. Even though we knew that it was gonna cost the county a little more, that area does not need any more housing or high-density housing, so we thought this was a good way to go about it, and we appreciated the property owner willing to do that. But it's kind of frustrating that the county paid quite a bit more for that right-of-way, then come right back before us to rezone it back to residential, which would have been a lot less expensive for the county. And as far as I know, when council approved it, they approved it with that restriction for no apartments, but when it got recorded, it did not get recorded with that restriction. So that's a little frustrating. The whole reason it was approved by commission and council was that restriction, which was not recorded. Now it doesn't matter because of the Lake Wiley overlay, but up until then, that could have been a huge issue for that area to have apartments or, something like that go in there would have been, so I just want to let staff know, I think that was under Steve Allen. I don't think you were here for that.
No, I was here for the whole thing. I was not in planning, I was in zoning at that time.
Okay, yeah, so I was going to say you weren't.
Sure, I was over the other side.
Yeah, you weren't in charge of that. I just wanted to make sure, I know you were not in charge of that. I just want to make sure that you all know what happened so it doesn't happen again.
Sure, it's very important that council includes their conditions in the motion. If they are not part of the motion, they are not part of the rezoning.
I spoke to council and I did not go back and look at the specific motion, but I was told that it was included. And it did not get included when recorded. So I don't have an issue with rezoning it. I'm a little frustrated that we rezoned it. It cost the county more money and now we're dropping it back down. And I wanted to make sure y'all knew that when there are conditions, it absolutely needs to get recorded properly because that could have been a nightmare.
Sure.
So that's it. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Okay. On to the next item, which is now the ordinance capital improvement plan.
Hi, I'm Christy Spears with the Fort Mill School Board. We weren't really sure if y'all wanted an update or presentation from us. We've produced a high-level sort of history and information that I've shared with you. I'm happy to go over that. This has been a long journey having to do with the Fort Mill School District impact fee. Tonight, we are specifically here to talk about amending our plan that would add 3 additional schools. If you look at the page that's on your desk, I don't think it comes as any surprise to anyone in the room that Fort Mill School District and our community has grown significantly over the last few years, which is why we've had an impact fee for a long time. In 2016, when the law allowed some changes to the act, we implemented or began the journey to implement the current impact fee that we have in place. That was signed in by the council in 2018. We were the first in the state to take advantage of this new act. And we have learned a lot of lessons that have been beneficial for some of the folks that have come after us, because now there's others that are also not just here in York County, but elsewhere in the state about the process for impact fees. But as a result of some of our learnings, we have been in litigation since it was implemented in 2018. Since that time, we've been collecting, or actually the York County has been collecting those fees. They were roughly $18,000 on a home, roughly $12,000 on an apartment or a townhome, and we have built up quite a bank in escrow with the county of about $53 million. The good news is we were able to prevail in both the circuit court as well as an appeal that went to the South Carolina Supreme Court about the legality and the constitutionality of the fee. So that part has been resolved. Very happy to have that occur in 20 and 21 with those 2 decisions. Where we are today is we, by that point, had built the schools that had been in need when we did the plan. And so we had therefore bonded the debt to build those schools. We'd done a bond referendum. We'd gotten it approved by the community, so we did a bond referendum. There's now some legal differences of opinion, but the county's not comfortable with us spending the $53 million on bonded debt. And so what we have in front of you today is an amendment to the plan. The act allows for an amendment to the plan to follow the same process as the original impact fee was enacted by. So just like in 2018, we come to you guys, it then goes to county council, it gets 3 readings, a public hearing, et cetera, to do an amendment to the plan. What the amendment does is we're 4.5 years later, and surprise, surprise, we need more schools. So at the time in 2018, we put 4 schools in the plan that were the 4 schools that were in the current facilities plan. And we based all of the calculations on those schools. We based the fee amount on those schools. At this point in time, we're in need of an additional 3 schools. And we've got an amendment, it's in your materials. It's at the back of our original study. The only thing that was done to the original study was an amendment that shows the continued progression of our student growth population to justify the need for the additional schools. We would like approval of this amended plan that would allow us, instead of having to use the money on debt for schools that already exist, this would allow us to use it basically as cash to build schools that don't exist yet. So that is what I guess it's a resolution to amend the impact fee that you have in your materials for tonight. That's kind of the Cliff Notes version of history. I know some of you guys may or may not have been here 5 years ago when we went through all this. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Do we have any questions at this time?
I actually do, but prior to that, and Mike, I'm going to direct this at you. Maybe I'm being too much of a legal nerd. Obviously, living in Fort Mill, I am absolutely inclined to support this. But I just do have a few legal questions to ask. So I am, whenever appropriate, going to ask, could we go into executive session and just get some legal advice?
Okay, so are you making?
I am making a
suspend the
motion to-
rules
I am-
and go into executive session?
And I'll second that too.
Okay.
Receive legal advice on this matter.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, then we adjourn for a minute.
Are
Or
y'all gonna
longer,
leave, or do we need to
probably.
leave? Do we
Pardon?
need to go
No,
out? Can y'all stay here? You're
no.
gonna go, okay.
Okay, executive session is closed and no actions were taken. So we are still debating and discussing the resolution amend this ordinance.
So
Are
I'll
there any
ask if there were any
questions?
questions.
Okay, thank you. You may be seated. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the amendments as presented by staff and presented by the chair of the Fort Mill School Board.
A second.
Do we have any further discussion? Okay, I was gonna make a motion to defer. We got this Friday afternoon, and absolutely no fault of the school board that we got this Friday afternoon, but I was on a plane by the time the email came in on Friday. I took a red eye back on Saturday, got in at 6 a.m. yesterday. I didn't even look at my emails until this morning. I have not had a chance to even really, I mean, I've flipped through it briefly, but I'm supposed to sign this saying that I've read it, I understand it, I've looked through it, and I haven't. So I am very uncomfortable, but I'm inclined to vote yes. I voted yes when it came before us 4 years ago, but without reading it, I'm just not comfortable doing that right now. So that's my discussion. Anybody have any other further comments or discussion on this?
Just kind of along the same lines you, Jamie, I got this email when I was at the airport Friday, and I landed at 3 o'clock today, so I haven't had any time to read through it. I understand the principle behind it now, but I just don't feel comfortable enough to take any action on it tonight.
And looking at the back of it, it does say that they would like our recommendation within 2 months to council, so this does not put them behind schedule, because I certainly don't want to delay things, put y'all behind schedule. It looks like if we were to defer it, it does not push it behind schedule.
It doesn't push it behind schedule. It also doesn't stop any further impact fees from being collected.
Right.
It doesn't change the amount, so the money would still be coming in. Just our decision would just be held off for 30 days. So if there's a way we can amend that to just defer for 30 days, I would kindly ask that.
Any further discussion?
And I do understand what my colleagues here are saying. I absolutely do. And I do think it's unfair and unfortunate that we got this at such a late date with such an important issue that's in front of us. Because it's very important to me and I live in Fort Mill, my child is in school in Fort Mill, I did take the time, and oftentimes I don't have the time. So I do respect that. I wasn't traveling and I did read it. And really and truly, the last 3 or 4 pages are the most important pages. What I would just offer to my colleagues who are uncomfortable with this right now is it doesn't change what has already been done. The Fort Mill School District and the county have been tied up in litigation. Our understanding now is this ends the litigation, and certainly the money has already been collected. The $50+ million is there, and to allow these people to go to work and build these schools, I'm not sure what more information we can have in 30 days that we don't have now. I think everybody agrees that the money, or at least this agreement here is the money can't be used on bond debt, that it's used on future construction. And so I'm not sure how much more information we need. So I am still inclined to support my motion, though I do respect and understand your concerns about getting it at such a late day. And I would just ask staff on something this important. It's a bit unfair to put us in this position. It is totally unfair to put us in this position.
And I'm not asking for more information, I'm just asking for time to go through the information.
Yeah, I
mean,
get
it's
it.
just, and unfortunately, I mean, like I said, I was on an airplane when the email came, so I don't have internet on the airplane, so I didn't even know it had come until today, unfortunately. I didn't.
Would you vote for something without reviewing it?
I do understand your concern.
I'm just asking, it's a very straightforward question. Would you vote for something that came in front of you without
Yeah,
reviewing
I do understand your concern. And I've expressed and acknowledged that I understand your concern. It's something this important. We absolutely should have had more time to read it and understand it. I totally respect your position. But because this is something that was important to me, I did take the time to read it. But there are times when I don't have the opportunity to read things. So I respect your position.
The question I would have along those lines, it does not slow down the school district whatsoever. It does not to defer this 30 days does not slow the school district down, does not change their plans, does not impact any legal proceedings, does not stop any impact fee collection. And so where I have a problem is the late, it's no fault of the school districts that we received this so late. Where I have the issue is that it says in here that the Planning Commission has received the impact study and amended capital improvement plan dated September 7th, 2022, prepared by Tischler Bice, has reviewed the study's findings and conclusions. I have not had a chance to do that because of when I received it. So for me to vote in favor of this without reviewing it makes that part of the resolution a lie. And I can't do that.
You weren't here when we
And I
initially did it, so yeah, you have no background on it.
I was not here for the first 45 pages of this.
Yeah.
So, you know, it comes back to the thing of, I can't do that in good conscience. And to me, it's immaterial because it does not stop any of the activities that they've got going on.
Any further comments or questions?
We ask questions beyond the group.
Yes, are you saying you want to ask questions of the school district? Yes, you may.
Okay, so I would like to hear from the school district of what you think delaying this decision, what harm you believe it might cause.
So that was the point I was raising my hand about. We do have a timeline to build a school, and it takes 2 to 2.5 years to build a school. Unfortunately, I believe this came out of County Council September 19th. I don't remember exactly what the date was that county sent it here. So I apologize. I don't know what the gap was in getting it from there to here. But what it does delay is a whole month worth of county council votes, because we have to go through 3 readings with county council, a first, a public hearing, and a 3rd reading. And we are very close to getting to the point where if we don't begin a school, we will not finish it by August, because unfortunately a 1-month delay from August to September for a school completion does matter. We would not be able to have it for a whole nother calendar school year. So that's why we've been very anxious. We're very excited about finally getting to this point. So in fact, a 1-month delay does put our ability to open a school in August of '24 in jeopardy, unfortunately. But I will also answer any other questions about the actual change, or I don't remember who said what, but the first 30 pages, literally nothing has changed. What's the new pieces are the last 3 pages in the amendment.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of commissioners who weren't here 4 years
Right.
ago when that was presented, so it's, even though it hasn't changed, it's all new information.
I understand.
For a lot of people up here, so. Okay. Any further questions of the district? Okay, thank you, ma'am.
I'll try again.
Any further questions or discussion on the motion to approve? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? Okay, all opposed? Okay, it looks like the nays have it. Do we have
I
another
make a
motion?
motion to defer the matter for 30 days so that we can receive any additional information that may come forward, and to give us time to review all the information that's been submitted to us.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion or comments on the motion? All in favor? Okay, all opposed? Okay, that looks like that passes, so that will be deferred until next month. Looks like the next item is rezoning 2222.
Can I just make a comment about
Yes.
that? Never mind. You know, I recognize the importance of this, and I do respect my colleagues in the fact that they did not have an opportunity to read this. And I just ask staff, and I don't know where it is, and I'm not placing blame. I don't know what the internal process is. But this was a lot of information to try to consume. And certainly I live in Fort Mill, so obviously this was on my radar screen because my neighbors ensured that it was on my radar screen. So I was waiting on it and did take the time, so I would be prepared here tonight, and maybe I should have asked some of my other colleagues to do the same. But something this important with this much information, I certainly understand the discussion of my colleagues here and respect that, and I just ask staff, don't put us in this position again with something like this important.
You
for
could al-
whatever it's worth.
You could also consider a special call meeting if you wanted to step up the timeline, if that met the board.
Can I make that motion?
Motion's been already,
Well,
Yeah,
we-
Well, no, he means for our.
Can I
our
make a
set
motion
special
that
call
w-
Meeting.
to call a special call meeting that we can deal with this sooner than 30 days.
Is that
All right.
something we can do without it being on the agenda, or is that something
Yeah,
you
part
will
of this
do
you
internally?
could coordinate with the staff and circulate the notices, so long as you comply with the FOIA statute and notice the public, then that's at the discretion of the board and staff.
Right, so I will make a motion, and I'll make a motion that we task staff with trying to establish a meeting time and date sooner than 30 days that we can deal with this, which will give my colleagues enough time to read and process the information, whatever time frame they're comfortable with. Sooner than the 30 days.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay.
Now, I made that motion, I guess I should have asked, being that traveling out here may create a challenge for someone, is it a problem if that's a virtual meeting, that since we're only dealing with one item, so people don't have to travel, does that create a problem? I know that's not part
We
of the
don't have
motion.
we don't have a virtual meeting process established, as
Okay.
far as I'm concerned.
You do not have one
Right.
established? Okay, I just wanted to hear. All right, thank you.
And then all-
However, the location of the meeting does not have to be here.
Okay.
That is correct.
So the location could be a more centralized place for us to get together and have a meeting, so long as we provided the proper public notice
Like the
and
HEPA
followed
office?
those. It could
Okay.
be more centralized than here.
Okay. All opposed, by the way? We didn't get to that yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
thought it had voted
No.
in.
Okay. All right.
2.
I thought three. Three opposed. Okay, and then moving on to rezoning 22-22.
This is a request to rezone, case 2222 from William Simmons on Filbert Highway in Clover at 28600000072. The request here is to zone a 5.93 acre parcel from RSF 40 to ID. The applicant is making the request to be able to establish a new business, a construction services use. The intent is to use this location to be able to store trucks, trailers, roll-off boxes, and heavy equipment on the property. And this is the former site of Stacy's Greenhouse. Property is located on Filbert Highway. It's about halfway between the towns of York and Clover. As you can see here, this is the majority of that is the former Stacy's Greenhouse. I'll call your attention to, and I have some better pictures, some roll-off boxes that are here as well. Also mentioned in our staff report are three parcels that actually take access through this development. There is a house located right here, and this house here. All three of them access from Filbert Highway through this development to get to their house, as it was when it was Stacy's. This property here is relatively flat. There are no water features or streams. The subject property is RSF 40. It is surrounded by RSF 40 in the immediate vicinity. There's also some RUD. RSF 40 also across the roads of AGC. Also on this map here, if I call your attention to, there's some parcels across behind this property here. You'll see those in future pictures. And also these properties back here along Smith Road. You'll see how they're impacted by this development. Comprehensive land use plan for this area here is single-family residential. And that, would you know, is low-density neighborhoods, rural and suburban in character. These pictures were taken about maybe Wednesday or Thursday of last week. And we are looking from Filbert Highway towards the property. As I mentioned here are the roll-off boxes here, and here's some properties over here. The houses that access this road over here come through this direction over here. This is, and I wanted to go back actually, I mentioned a couple of neighborhoods that are currently under construction. If you'll see these houses that are back in the back here, these are relatively new. And this area right here are one lot homes that are currently under construction as well, or currently pulling permits. So there'll be houses along this section right through here. This is looking from the property looking eastward toward Filbert Highway, and you can see in the area here more of the agricultural uses going on in this part of the area here. These roll-off boxes that are located right here are these boxes right here in the parking lot. The ones that are over here, these roll-off boxes, are here. So what's in these boxes? Things like that. Metal materials are being stored in these roll-off boxes on this site. Going back, you can also see there are other equipment on the property, some sort of construction equipment, and a variety of other items that are stored throughout the property. Some more boxes that are being stored right now with equipment in the boxes. So staff recommends denial for this request. The comprehensive plan supports here for single family, so it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. The uses allowed here on ID can be very intense. They can be a lot more intense than these uses right here. Manufacturing uses, plastics, fiberglass machinery. And as I mentioned as well, there are those 3 houses that actually have to access their house going through this property. So that would also impact whatever they do here in this location. As you can tell by the pictures, this is a parcel that is being used currently without any kind of staff approval or zoning approval. Any questions from staff?
Was this,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, your district.
I was wondering, when this was Stacy's, when it was a greenhouse, was this non-conforming use?
It may or may not have been there before zoning. I forget how long Stacy's was there.
Okay.
But yeah, as it was, it would have been considered legal non-conforming had it been legal. But yeah, you cannot do a greenhouse in RSF 40 at this.
Okay.
Yeah, my question was just gonna be along the lines of that. So regardless of what the request is, what could go on there right now?
Single
Could they
family.
continue that greenhouse operation if that was, or has that been abandoned so long?
It's been, oh yeah, it's definitely, they've been gone for years. So
Okay,
yeah,
so,
they
so the
couldn't do that.
only option they had is to demolish the entire site and do it as residential.
That's correct. As it's currently zoned.
And there's no other zoning option that's available that would,
There are no commercial uses in RSF 40, maybe special exception, you took that thing out for recode, the special exception for anything.
it's a lot of money that's been
I
put into
understand.
that site.
Yeah, yeah.
It would be a shame to see it go away without it, at least.
Sure, but you have the different extremes, you've got residential and you have ID. So
I get it.
That's the extreme you're going to at this request.
I understand. And so I'm trying to see, is there something else that could be?
You're trying to look for something kind of in the middle that would be
Yeah, I
still
mean, it-
business,
yeah,
but less intensive.
Yeah, something that's less intensive, maybe they don't do everything that they want either. Just is, yeah. That's
Yeah.
all my question is. I'm not trying to,
I have a couple quick.
Sure.
So how long have they been operating this way? Do we know?
I'm not, sorry?
5 years.
Perhaps
Okay.
5 years. I don't know that they were having those roll-off boxes for 5 years. I couldn't find aerials that
Okay.
show that. There may have been some kind of activity there,
Okay.
but I don't think I have any aerials for 5 years old that have that amount of roll-off
And-
boxes.
Would you like to ask the applicant so you can get a
Certainly.
concrete answer? Okay.
Let me, can I
Any more
just,
questions for staff?
let me, one
For
more
staff,
for
okay.
you real quick. And is this an enforcement action? Or is this,
No,
how
this
did
is
this come?
different. This is, the property owner reached out to me. He was considering purchasing the property and wanted to know if what he was doing would be legal. And I said no. And I believe he bought it anyway.
Okay. All right.
And just to expand on that answer, if at the end of the process, county council does not adopt the ID district, then this would be an enforcement case.
You run that by me one more time.
Yes.
That was a little fast and on
Sure.
the inside.
Yep, so if at the end of this rezoning request process, county council declines to rezone it to ID for this proposed use, then it would become an enforcement action. They would have to remove this use from the property.
Understood, okay, because of how it's currently zoned. Understood, okay.
Did you still want to ask
I
a
do
question
have-
of the
yes,
applicant?
just a couple
Okay.
questions.
If you would step up, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Emily Brown, 926 Oakland Avenue, Rock Hill, South Carolina, 29730. I am an attorney and I represent William Simmons, who's the applicant here.
Okay.
Okay, and
Mike?
so how long has Mr. Simmons been conducting business this way
So, Mr.
on this site? I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Sure. So Mr. Stacy started letting Mr. Simmons park some trucks there. As you're aware, the greenhouse operation, there were transfer trucks coming in and out. It's a commercial operation. About 10 years ago, Mr. Simmons would use it for some vehicle storage. And then after Mr. Stacy died, the subsequent owner entered into a lease with Mr. Simmons that allowed him to continue using it for storage, just like what you see in this picture right here. Mr. Simmons was a lessee at the time, and then when he started inquiring about purchasing the property, that's when he found out the zoning did not allow for vehicle storage on the property. We have discussed less intensive uses. The way the issue is, Mr. Simmons is solely going to be storing vehicle, the roll boxes and vehicles on the property. There's not going to be any kind of manufacturing or anything like that on the property. As you can see, there's already asphalt, there's already gravel, there's already buildings from the greenhouse. Mr. Simmons has actually improved the property. He's torn down some of those old derelict, greenhouses that were there. He's trimmed back some of the brush, and he is, going to continue to make improvements to the property so that it looks nice. This is really not that different of a use from what Stacy's did as far as the trucks coming in and out. There's actually probably less vehicle traffic. Trucks come in once a day, pick up their boxes, they leave, they go do their, errands, pick up the metal and take it to the recycling facility, come back, they bring them back in the evening and store it. And, that's what they're doing on the property. And this is actually better for the surrounding houses. There's no runoff from all of the irrigation. And, essentially it's not going to interrupt the ability of the people to continue to use the driveways to access their property.
Thank you. Any
Okay.
further questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Okay.
Diane, can I come back one more for you then? So, as ID, what other uses are permitted that might cause some concern for all of us?
I believe your neighbor Greg might actually have a list of those in his book. Did you have that with you or not? You didn't bring it with you? There's a long list of uses in ID. I pulled out some of the ones that, most of it are involved manufacturing. That's the majority of them. A big thing about ID also is the outside storage. So a lot of those uses have, as you can see here, they're leaving things outside, but it's a variety of uses that can go in ID.
Can you all help us understand what made you choose ID besides some other RSF, whatever, that might allow you to do some, or RUD that might allow you to do some of this lighter stuff? What makes this considered not
This is what we
light?
determined as being construction services. And we actually have a
Okay.
determination that this is used in the operation of constructing, whether it's demolition, whether it's construction. So that's how it is, it's used in conjunction with that.
Okay.
Well, from what you're saying, it was even the old business that was there, the greenhouse, that was out of compliance as well, right?
It depends upon when that actually started. I don't know when Stacy's opened.
If it was there before zoning.
It was
would've-
probably there before zoning, and
Yeah.
therefore it was a legal non-conforming use. So Stacy's could not open up here, reopen in this location here, as is currently zoned.
Yeah, my concern is ID is just so intensive when you're surrounded by residential and larger lot residential. So, do we have any other questions of staff?
Yeah. well, If by some magic, it does get recommended would you also recommend that a full commercial site plan be submitted once it's,
That will happen regardless, because this has never been an approved site, so I would need a condition to do, that's part of the responsibility of the,
okay?
Yes.
I just want to make that clear.
yeah. And
So
we
there would-
haven't, we
so
haven't
as part of that-
proposed any conditions for this one like we have in some previous ones, that if you decide to go this route here, some things we'd like you to do. The site plan will take care of a lot of those site issues, because it does have to come in for that one. And, you know,
Like
if
buffering.
we need to in the future, we can recommend to council for additional conditions.
Any further questions of staff? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to uphold staff's recommendation and deny the application.
Do we have a second?
I'm going to second that, but kind of reluctantly, that it's on its merits, and kind of express the concerns we all have, that we feel like in a lot of these cases, we get stuck with not a lot of options that allow us, under the rules we have, to help property owners find some happy medium. But on the merits of what we've had put before us, I would have to second that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I feel the same way. I just want to say that it is unfortunate that this setup can't be used for something that it was intended, well, that it was originally used. There's all that asphalt that's already there, and converting this back to something residential, I feel like would be a burden on the property owner, but I can't get on board with ID either.
Yeah, because then you're a burden on all the surrounding property owners. It's an unfortunate situation.
Sorry, if I can add as well to that, you know, there may be other opportunity for something else, to come in and look at something besides ID or RSF 40. There might be something else that might fit better here. And so there is maybe an opportunity for
A
something.
less intensive
Yes.
business.
And I'd be happy to see that come back if there was another option.
Montrio, it looked like you wanted to say something?
Only going to say that, you know, for that reason is, you know, I have to be consistent that I'm going to vote the opposite of my colleagues, because I just hate to see a small business owner who obviously has invested so much, and this has been operating here, that there's not some kind of middle ground we can find where they can continue to build and expand their business. So based on those merits, I'm sorry.
She's saying that there is a middle ground, it's just not ID.
I understand, yeah.
So, there, you know, the burden would fall back on the applicant to come back with another proposal, possibly different zoning, which likely would be. But it's not saying that they can't utilize this. It just can't, my motion is it can't be ID.
But I think, Matt, the challenge that we have is the business owner. This is the business they run, and under our current plan, the business that they run fall under ID. So for that small business owner, there is no middle ground. It's either you get this or you don't do this business here. And so I think that's a very difficult position to put a small business in, that there should be something in here where we can figure out how this business can continue to operate the business that has operated there.
And that's kind of where I have one foot in each camp here, because I agree with your sentiment about how we get stuck. What my concern is designating this ID that opens up a lot of other things for the future. And I think a lot of it has to do with how was the business designated and who made that determination about what category they fell into. Some of the room is in the applicant seeking a different zoning, but there's also some room in what do we interpret this business to be and how do we categorize that. And I think that's just a staff decision. I don't know that that's any of us up here or anyone else, but that would be my encouragement for future. If we're going to deny this, well, does it fit into a different category that would help give him a zoning that will let him keep doing what he's doing, but that you all will be comfortable with, from your understanding of the code and what we're doing, that it makes sense for it to be set that way and get to that best of both worlds kind of scenario. And it may not be possible, but this is always a frustration that we have to have someone who's trying to make a living and doing something and seems to be doing everything right. I mean, this is not junkyard dog type pictures that we have in front of us. These people are really making a concentrated effort to have a neat and organized and functioning business. And I'd like to see us find some ways as a team somehow that we can grant more of these kinds of things. But again, on the merits, what we're asking to do here, I think ID is too far to go for this situation.
But I get what everybody is saying, but this property was a non-conformance from the very beginning, from based on what's presented. So,
For a different use.
right.
When it was operating as a greenhouse. Now, if this was still operating as a greenhouse today, this wouldn't be an issue, even if it was just a matter of it changing owners. They would still be able to operate it as Stacy's greenhouse, or Simmons greenhouse, you know, whatever the new owner would have called it. But it's not. They're trying to do something totally different, which now introduces a whole nother set of issues when they, let's just say for argument's sake that the rezoning does get approved like that, they will still have to come back with a commercial site plan. And in that commercial site plan, there's probably going to either be a number of variances that they're going to have to try to obtain, and do a significant amount of pavement removal just to be able to meet code for things like parking and buffering and screening.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because as a lessee, you have no idea what the zoning is. The owner says, yeah, of course you can do it. And you think, well, it looks like a business, so I can do it. So I can certainly understand how it happened. But
You
yeah,
know, like just-
I see ID being
Just seeing that
extremely
picture up there,
intensive.
for example, you know, like where that truck is parked in the lower left corner, it looks like it's about somewhere around the property line. All that pavement would have to come out. So, I mean, there's significant amount of cost implication in approving it as well. We just don't see it.
Right. Any further discussion? All right, do we have a vote to deny? All in favor? Okay, and opposed? Montreal? Okay. On to item 2231.
This is case number 2231 for Hawkinson at 304 Mark Trail Lane in Fort Mill. Tax map number is 72600000076. The request is to rezone a 1.3 acre parcel from UD to RMX 20. And the reason for this is the applicant would like to construct an addition to the existing home, and you cannot do residential uses in UD. Property is located off of Pikeview Road and Mark Trail Road in the Fort Mill area. Existing single-family home there in the front. They want to do the extension somewhere in this area here. I will add, though, that when they came in for the application for this, we had to pause the rezoning because it was a code enforcement issue with some of this stuff in the back. They have since cleaned all that up and allowed the case to go ahead and go forward and remove the zoning violation, the code violation. There is a very small creek towards the top of the property. Other than that, the property is relatively flat. Zoning for the area. The subject property is right here in this UD. There is other UD properties around here. Where you see the one that's already been rezoned to RMX 20, they came through a few years ago when we had the opportunity for property owners to rezone to a residential use for free. And some people did and some people didn't. You can see all the ones that are still here in gray. They chose not to at the time and have to come forward as they do any kind of construction or renovation. It's still free though. The area here for the comprehensive plan is neighborhood residential, which is a medium density neighborhoods, a mixture of housing types. You can have a bit of a commercial at intersection of major roads. Staff is recommending approval for this application here. It's for the comprehensive plan in the neighborhood, and it also removes one more UD zone parcel, list of parcels. Any questions of staff?
Quick one, if you back up 2 slides. One more. So below that RMX 10, that gray area that's UD,
Like here,
yes, ma'am?
and here?
Yes.
Yeah.
So was it looks like kind of subdivision stuff
So
there,
this couldn't
so,
happen now.
okay.
So back in the day, before we had actually a revision that we did earlier this summer that codifies that you cannot recombine properties that are split zone, which you see quite a few of those now, we would have had them rezone these RUD area here, UD area to RMX 10 for all that. And so that's why, because even some of these zoning districts run through the houses. So,
Okay, so that UD was there when the bottom part of the development was done, and then the expand out had to be done at RMX 10? Is that what I'm thinking?
no, that I believe that was the old RD2, RD1.
Okay.
And so that was originally zoned that, and these portions here were UD, and they combined all those together to develop that into townhouses. And
So housing
that's how
used
the
to be
original
allowed
zoning was.
in UD, and it's no longer? So before you were here, we went through this whole big rezoning process, but we
Yeah,
weren't
yeah,
gonna
the
force people.
rezone. I understand.
Right, we didn't wanna
Okay.
force residents to rezone, so they have the option,
I understand.
so.
So it used to be a permitted use?
Yes.
There, I'm getting it.
Yeah,
There
it
you
used to be
go.
permitted
Okay.
use. We took that out a few years ago, 2015, I think it was.
A little more coffee, almost there.
Are there any further questions? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second? Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. On to item 2234, which looks fairly similar.
This is similar to it, yep, a little different. Case 2234 on Archer Drive in Rock Hill, tax map number 62400000137. Request to rezone a .23 acre parcel from UD to RMX 10, and the applicant proposes to build a single-family home on this parcel. It's very difficult to be able to put everything into context. This is the Blackman Road neighborhood. These are a lot of very small parcels. This neighborhood, I think, was 1960s is when it was originally platted. And few parcels here and there were built, not a whole lot. But this is really a donut hole of Rock Hill. Zooming into it, you can see where there are some homes that have been built along the way, but for the most part, there's still a lot of vacant properties throughout here. The applicant is requesting this rezoning to be able to build a house on this parcel right here. The area here is relatively flat. There's no water features. There are some properties that have already been rezoned RSF 30, and those were ones who did take advantage of that program that we did a few years ago, and they opted to go to RSF 30. You might ask why RSF 30 then and RMX 10 here. A lot of those actually had either existing manufactured home or the intent to build a manufactured home, and that's why we had them recommend RSF 30 to be able to make them a compliant property. This property here is vacant, and he'll put a single-family stick-built house. The comprehensive land use plan here shows the area as municipal infill. We don't get a whole lot of that for rezonings. But what that is, that's intended for small pockets of land surrounded by the unincorporated areas. And so where you see where it's butting up against the city of Rock Hill or town of Fort Mill, we have a thing called municipal infill. And we look to their plans to kind of help guide us, make these things work together. So in the case of this property right here, the city of Rock Hill's comprehensive land use plan has this also is called neighborhood residential. And so this request here is consistent with the comprehensive plan of the city of Rock Hill, and staff recommends approval.
Any questions of staff?
Recommend approval.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Give it to Kate.
All in favor? Okay. On to item 6, rezoning 2235.
This is case number 2235 for Randy Sudriff and Carolina Crossing in York. Tax map number 44801010042. The request is to rezone a 1.25 acre portion of a 7.5 acre parcel from RSF 40 to AGC 1. And the purpose for this request is to be able to combine the property with an adjacent property, and this property has dual zones, so therefore they can't rezone or we can't recombine property. It's in what used to be Carolina Crossing's golf course. As you can see, the little area right there, and we'll show closer, that's the area that's going to be rezoned from RSF to AGC1. This property here has quite a large pond on it. There's a few streams as well, but it's mostly wooded. There's the pond and the streams. It's a little bit of topo as well. The zoning for the area, as you can see here, a little easier to see where that's currently RSF 40 and the property around it is already AGC1. The applicant intends to combine with a portion of the property from over here and add some of that acreage to this property. And so he wants to get this area here rezoned to make them all AGC1. There's AGC1 in the area as well as RUD and RUD1, all have very similar uses. Comprehensive land use plan for the area here is single-family residential, which, as you know, is low-density neighborhoods for rural or suburban in character. Staff recommends approval for this request. It is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. However, this action does remove that parcel split zoned. There's plenty of AGC1 in the area, and the uses that are allowed here are allowed in other properties nearby.
Do we have any questions of staff? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, that looks unanimous. On to item 7, rezoning 2237.
This is case number 2237 for Vizier, on South Sutton Road in Fort Mill. Tax map number 65900000007. The request here is to rezone a .50 acre parcel, so half acre, from OI to GC, office and institution, to general commercial. And the applicant intends here to be able to establish a new vehicle sales and repair service business on this parcel. This is off of Sutton Road, just to the northwest of the intersection with the I-77, very adjacent to the Fort Mill area as well. The property currently has a, maybe it's an office sort of retail place and a shed or a building. Majority of the property in the front here is just a very large, what maybe once was paved, but it's now pretty much the gravel parking, and there's some trees around it as well. Nothing here for the environmental. It's very flat, no water features. Here's the subject property. You can see it is OI, but everything else around here is RSF 30. There are a few properties here, LI and PD. You can remember we had a rezoning just recently on that parcel right up here that went recommending for LI, the expansion of the landscape company. The comprehensive plan shows everything on the eastern side of South Sutton Road here to be neighborhood residential, on the western side, single family. This property, as you know, is for medium density neighborhoods that allow a mixture of housing types. Some commercial can happen at the intersection of major roads. Staff is recommending denial. This request is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the uses allowed in the GC zoning district are much more intense as the plan envisioned, and as this area is building up more residential, wouldn't be compatible. Any questions of staff?
I got a real quick, small technical question.
Sure.
So if that's state OI, and I did all my repairs inside that building and nothing changed about the external appearance, would that be acceptable or not?
For what?
Well,
Do vehicle sales?
Not sales, say I just did the repair part, and I
So-
did all the repairs within the building, door
Oh,
closed,
no,
so the
no.
external look doesn't change at all?
No. It's-
Okay,
No. It's by the use. So the
Okay.
use is vehicle sales and repair. And so that's how, whether you do it inside or outside, doesn't matter. You're doing it there.
okay.
That used to be a convenience store.
I think a long time
Long
ago, it
time
may
ago,
have been
yeah.
something.
It's been closed up for a long time
It
as
was
well.
just, point of reference, it was rezoned probably 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and the intention was here was to be able to do a photography studio. The person wanted to buy the property and do a photography studio at that location, which even though the comprehensive plan wasn't fully supportive of that, we felt at the time it was a good use of that piece of property. It was very low intense for a photography studio. You can utilize an existing building, and so it was a better choice than to leave it vacant. And so OI, we feel as though that's an appropriate use at that location. Any kind of small office could go in there. So something less intense than a general commercial that would be the vehicle sales and repairs.
Yeah, I think this is kind of similar to the last the last one that we just did earlier today is pretty intense vehicle sales and repairs right in the middle of a neighborhood.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of tough on the neighbors. So, do we have any further questions? Do we have a motion?
I would make a motion to support staff's recommendation and deny.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion to deny? Okay. Rezoning 2238.
Rezoning case 2238 from Mr. Appleyard and Ackenback Road in Clover, tax map number 56500000172. The request is to rezone a 14.5 acre parcel from RMX 10 to RUD 1. The applicant intends to be able to establish a small family farm business and also to protect the right to farm on his property. The property is right actually at the North Carolina line, and I believe when they realign the state lines, his property now actually goes into North Carolina for a small piece of it and back into South Carolina for the majority of it. This is in the Lake Wiley Clover area. As you can see, there is one single family home on this parcel right here. There is a neighborhood adjacent to it, and I referred to that in our conditions. It's about this neighborhood right here, having some kind of protection from it. Also manufactured home as well, in the home park, sorry, in here. State line, yeah. The property does have some slope to it. There are a couple of streams on the property, and at the southern tip, it also is part of this large pond right here. Zoning for the area is RMX 10. It was zoned that way originally back in the 80s. It was for this chunk right here was given RMX 10. One person owned all that. It's since been developed into a neighborhood here, a manufactured home park here. But a lot of RUD and RUD1 surround this area right here. Comprehensive plan shows for this area here, it's being rural residential, and that's comprised of low-density residential uses and agricultural homesteads, which aligns with the RUD zoning district. Staff recommends approval of this rezoning request. It's compatible with the comprehensive plan as well as the area. We do offer a condition that we'd like you to consider, and that is to preserve a 50-foot undisturbed buffer along the parcel's eastern border, adjacent to that neighbor I was just mentioning. And that's to be able to, when they would come in for developing as a general farming use, next single family, that would be required. So we want to have that buffer to remain now. Any questions of staff? And I can go back and show you what I was talking about. There you go, that might help.
Real quick, so that sliver at the top, is that no man's land? Is that his property, but it's just not shown drawn that way because how the state line moved? Or
I think it's so small you probably can't see it when I have the thick lines in there. But I mean, there is property that he owns outside of the state. It's just really, really tiny.
Okay. And the buffer yard you're talking about is that whole, kind of that whole bottom line
It's the
there?
buffer,
Yep.
yeah, along
That's
through
right
here.
there. Okay.
To establish that, to protect the neighborhood next door.
Any further questions of staff? Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve with condition.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, on to item 9.
Okay, this is the comprehensive plan update. This is the resolution. We're hoping you support our new comprehensive plan and give a recommendation to council to approve the plan. Just going to kind of go over this, and I don't know how you want to have questions of me as well, but I'm going to give you an overview of where we are, where we've been, how we got here. As you all are aware, we started in 2020. We took a little bit of a pause during Recode, but we brought forward to you all of the plan's goals, policies, and strategies to review, give you an update, and get your comments. And then staff went back and we did edits and revisions, and we've changed the document to reflect things that we've completed, how Recode has changed and changed the code and had changed and met some of the requirements and requests of the comp plan. We held a workshop with you back in June and kind of went over all this, and we went over in depth all the different land use map changes that we're recommending as well. And then we held 5 public meetings over the past couple of months. We heard from about 100 people that came out to those meetings. I thank you for those who attended as well. And the purpose was that to be able to show the public the plan and to get some feedbacks on what we were doing. And in that setting, we had boards for all the elements, and on the board, it had kind of what that element was for the public who really wouldn't know. What have we been able to achieve since the plan was adopted to kind of say, hey, we've done these great things, and then some revised goals. And you can kind of see, there's Chris over here, he's standing back with some people, and these are some of the boards that they would wander through, and they would, if they liked it, they might put a blue dot, they might get a red dot to kind of support the different goals. So just to kind of give you some highlights, what have we done with this plan? Well, for one thing, we have combined what was once the state of the county with the comp plan into one document. So as you're reading through, you can see what this element is about, and then see the goals to achieve that element. We also introduced 2 new designations, the transitional area, and those are for areas where maybe on major roads that are seeing some transition from being a single-family home that may not be appropriate. Maybe we would combine some of those properties together to do something else, then we develop those properties. And we also added the Regional Employment Center, and that was to go along with the RECODE's new BT, or Business Technology Mixed-Use Development, and those were to identify some areas where that district might be appropriate. And then we strengthened some policies, and I picked some ones that you all are familiar with. Language to support conditions, and so we want to be able to say, to kind of support for the Planning Commission, for the staff to be able to support when we do apply conditions and give you some guidelines for that. We see a lot of the rezonings that go from AGC to RUD. And so the plan does have some language in there to be able to say when is that appropriate and when is that not appropriate. To give us some guidance, give you some guidance of how to apply that. And then in we also added some stuff here about access management for commercial, to be able to manage how people are coming in and off of the road to minimize those intersections and those accesses. We also did a future land use map and highlights. And like I mentioned before, we came before with you in June, and we went over each one of those. And I described as to what this was and what it was trying to achieve. And I pulled out, there's like 4 main kind of categories that we were looking at when we did this. One big thing was to go agricultural, rural, residential, is to introduce some more rural residential to the area. And those were put in areas that were abutting single-family residential. So if you already had that yellow color next to a dark green, we added a light green. That's to kind of help how that worked visually. And then also we had a lot of agricultural butting up against the towns. And so we had agricultural designation up against City of Rock Hill. And that didn't make sense. We need to have a transition area there. And then we also found some areas where they've already been parcelized. And so we already have areas that were 1 to 5 acre lots. And so maybe to kind of expand upon that already established development pattern. Like I mentioned before, we had some new transitional areas. We added those areas on some South Sutton Road for where to be able to combine parcels together to do something different there. Some on Gold Hill Road, Highway 160, and on Highway 5 across from Moss Justice Center. We also increased the municipal infill, and so we looked to figure out what's been annexed by the different towns and cities, and then should we now transition that more over to municipal infill, because it's more in a donut hole kind of area. And then we worked on the mixed-use nodes. The current plan, are there round circles, so there's no real development to that, no real pattern. And so we modified those nodes to be able to reflect the actual development pattern and where you would see that mixture of nodes and where you wouldn't. And then we also removed 4 that were either surrounded by the towns or they just really weren't coming through like we thought they would develop as a mixed-use node. So like I mentioned, we reviewed all of those separate land use map amendments with you. And I'm not going to go through all that again this evening because I think you've seen all those. But I do want to bring forward one that was not in that list because we didn't know about or hadn't really recognized that. This is in the town of Fort Mill. And we're going to have a rezoning request coming forward in a few months for something in here. And this is Highway 21 going towards 77, going north. Highway 51, it's going to go over to Pineville. This is Flint Hill Road over here. And this little wedge right here, the current plan has that as being neighborhood residential. Maybe it was reflection of what's below it, and that was what influenced having that area here as neighborhood residential, but in reality, this doesn't work. And so we went ahead and just want to make that change now and put that forward in the current comp plan to make this is what we're calling artisan employment, which is kind of a rebranding of our current employment centers. This area here is a concrete plant. These are pretty just like small warehouses all through here. And so we felt that that would be a better use for that. So I wanted to, full disclosure, we've already made that change that you didn't see before, but it's in the plan now. So, yeah, I was surprised when I saw that. I was like, ooh, good time we can take care of it now. So the next steps, once again, I'm hoping to receive your recommendation to approve this evening. And if that's the case, we'll go in for planning or go to council. First reading on November the 7th, then we'll have a public hearing and second reading, and then hopefully have this completed in December the 5th for third reading. Any questions from the planning commissioner?
You have a
Everybody looks
question?
To me, I have some, but I don't want to steal everybody's thunder.
All right, I just got one question for you. Goes back to the artisan. Is there an intention to apply that to more areas going forward?
This would align, well, we actually switched over what was employment center. So we're on the current land use plan map that had some of that lighter purple that wasn't the I-77 corridor, and that also wasn't the industrial. And so this is that in-between thing. And so what was employment center, we've kind of rebranded a little bit to artisan. So it's going to align still with the LI districts. That will make sense, but it's to allow some smaller sort of, either cabinet makers or something like that, as well as some smaller light industrial as well. So we didn't add a whole lot more apart from this one here. We just kind of rebranded it.
Okay.
Mike?
Yeah, so I know we had the community meetings, and you mentioned in here that we had about 100 people show up.
Most of them were from Lake Wiley.
When I glanced through this, I didn't see anything that gave us the feedback of what those people said, what their pros were, what their cons, what concerns they had, and I think that detail's kind of important for us to understand as commissioners.
Sure, and I had started to do a slide just on that, and I can pretty much tell you what it was. The top two, I think they did the top one was more about the preserving land. That was the biggest concern, was to preserve the natural character of the land. And those were saying they liked the buttons on the natural resources element, and to protect and conserve that. Also, it was to be able to, further on that, preserve cultural resources, preserve our history. Also was to be able to, there's one that says leverage our outdoor uses to be able to have more parks and recreation and open space. So heavily favoring anything involving natural areas, open space, green space, preserving. So that was, it was almost,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mike?
That's because most people came from Lake Wiley who
That was across the
replied.
board, because there were different communities had different issues. I think
That's
Matt
right.
and I talked about
We
that.
talked about, I went to the one at Castle Heights, which was, I believe that was the last one. And one of the things that had struck me was a lot of people were very much against upgrading infrastructure. And that just kind of blew me away. And we talked about it for a minute, and she had made the point that that was something that's really specific to that area. So if you looked at like all of the pluses and minuses, it would look like it's all over the board, but really, like, a lot of it is centralized to where it is. Where
I'd
it's
certainly,
coming from. So
I'd
the
like to
people-
see that, yeah,
so the
if we
people
could.
like the people in Clover had very different opinions of what they like and don't like from the people down in,
And I think it would be helpful for us to see if you
Sure, I can
guys
send you that.
can put that together by area, so that as we're sitting here trying to make decisions that would affect a particular group, we understand that this group's looking for more of this group's looking for more of that, and to the extent we can, that we're meeting what the citizens are looking for us to do in that area.
Yeah, and I think it was a valid exercise. The only downfall with that was when someone would put something that didn't like, we had no context. And so there was a couple of folks, when I spoke to them, I said, really, why would you not like that? And it was something about pedestrians and trails. And she's like, well, there's a word connections, and I don't like connectivity. And so to her, that was the buzzword she didn't like, but she gave it a red. So
Right.
you have to kind of put that into place, because without that, what do you don't like about it? It's easy to say what you do like about it, but why do you not like that? And that's hard to get by just having a little dot.
Understand, yeah, and as is the case with any survey, you answer the one question, but you really need the 4 follow-up questions underneath that to get to the real heart of whatever the issue is.
Right.
So I understand that challenge, but I think as best you all can with broad strokes of what are the concerns by area will help us.
Sure, I can send
serve
you that
better.
this evening. I've got it, it's back in the office, all
Okay.
ready to go.
Any further questions of staff? Do we have a motion?
I have a motion to defer because this is 130-something pages, and I know that we want to keep going, but again, we had a lot of material that we had this time that came to us this Thursday, and I still haven't had a chance to digest all of this and see what it means. I know that we have a lot of things in, just glancing at it, there were things of what we're doing in the plan, but I'm not really sure I could tell someone if they asked me what's different about this plan than what we had before. So some kind of net how things are different, where we were, and here's the adjustments that we made to this plan as a, I'm not sure of a good way to describe this, but it's the delta, right? What
What's
is
the change?
different? What has really changed in the plan? I don't think I have a good concept of that to vote well tonight. So I make a motion to defer to our next meeting.
Do we have a
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
For the exact same reasons.
Okay,
All right.
any further discussion? Can you push your mic button?
So can I ask about the artisan employment?
Mm-hmm.
So how is that different from LI?
Well, there's 2 different things, remember. So you have your comprehensive plan, and then you have your zoning districts. And so the plan is the artisan employment. And so that's going to recommend what zoning district you would apply there. So we try to think about, when you're doing the plan, what does that align with in terms of the zoning districts? And you might align artisan with LI. So they're similar, but there's 2 different kinds of text, basically.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions?
And I think we've gone through this pretty extensively. I mean, we've had multiple meetings. We've had multiple planning commission items to go over this individually. We had a pretty extensive workshop, pretty extensive public input from it. I think this is pretty much ready to go. So I would like to vote in favor of it. That's how that can happen tonight.
May I make another comment? And though I do agree with Matt that this process has been very extensive, I do know that there were some residents or some citizens who made some comments. And as Mike indicated, it would be just nice to see what comments were made by the citizens and how or if any of those comments were implemented into any revisions and kind of what was their, I have not done a comparison, and maybe you have. I would just like to see what was the original versus what we have in front of us now. I didn't sit down with the 2 documents and compare them side by side versus the comments that were gotten. And I think to be well educated, just as you indicated on the last issue, to be well educated on something to vote on, that would be helpful.
Okay, so you're wanting to defer and requesting a comparison, the change between the old plan and the new plan, and what the comments were and how that was
I
implemented.
would request.
Correct.
I would
Okay.
ask that if you could also make that vote, amend that motion to put that on the next special meeting as well.
Okay.
But I'm not sure I understand the
Next
request.
special call meeting.
They're requesting a special called meeting to go over the impact fee, and then they would like to have this included in that same meeting so we can vote on both at that time.
Okay.
So motion to defer so that we
if
can get the
I-
change.
I could adjust the motion per Matt's request if we can get all of that information from them in time. I think what we're talking about kind of 2 different things here because we have information that we just haven't had a chance to review. With the plan, we're asking staff to provide us with more information that I don't know if this gives them enough time.
How long do you think that
Well-
would take to get just the change between the
So
two
here's-
plans
here's-
and the
here's
comments?
Here's the dilemma, is I could never give you a word-for-word track change from the current plan to the old plan. I just could not do that. Because there's been not so much word changes or concepts or policies, but more of wordsmithing, rearranging things, this section may now be over here. What was once natural resources is now in resiliency. So to be able to give you a word-for-word track changes, red line version of what was old, what's new, I can't do that. There's
Right.
no way.
And I
You'd
hope,
never be able to follow it. So, what I tried to do was pull out some highlights, which was the same thing I did for our workshop, was I pulled out the things that changed. And so I can provide you that overview. It may not give you enough information that you're comfortable, but I'm willing to sit down and kind of go over stuff. But to be able to give you a succinct document that shows that, I can't do it.
and I'm not asking for a red line change type depth. No,
Yeah.
I'm talking more,
I get you
what
high
you all
level.
did in the meetings to present the information on those charts. What is different on those charts than what you might have presented to someone 5 years ago? And I think if you do it at that level, I'm gonna have the understanding of how any shifts have taken place or what we may be doing different now that we've updated the plan versus what it was before. That's really what I'm just trying to get the sense
I can give you some
of.
high-level information in terms of what was there and what's changed. I think
So
it could
about how long
improve-
do you think that would take you to just get an email out to everybody on something like that?
I can do it in a couple of weeks, and so I don't think we can get a meeting sooner than 2 weeks, perhaps, for the special called meeting. I'm not too sure when you were thinking about doing that. But
So you
let
think
me-
you could
let me
get that
just
out?
See when we can get that meeting scheduled for a special called meeting, and see if we can do it all, and give you time to be able to read it
Okay.
and go ahead. Give you a
So
week's
keep the
notice
motion
to-
as the motion to defer with request for that information. If we get it in time, add it on the agenda for the special called. If we don't get it in time, then we don't. Is that kind of
Agreed,
what you're all
yes.
looking for?
Yes.
Okay.
I can agree with that. So a motion to defer, requesting the additional information. If we can get that information in time for the specially called meeting, we'll address it then. If not, then our next regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay.
That's a
And you
mouthful.
still second that? Yes. Okay, that updated, all right. Any further discussion?
Just, Diane, for the most part, I know there was a number of comments received from the public. How many of those resulted in a direct change to the revision?
0.
That's what I needed to hear. So
Not a single one.
basically, all of that input they got did not change what the document is.
Then what was the input for?
The input was more of a presentation to them, and then get their comments back. When you see the chart of where they had that I don't like, and it may be a total of 30 or 40 things, versus the 100 and something things that I like, that was not the intention for the meeting. It was to present what we have. There weren't succinct comments to be able to make those changes. And once again, like you mentioned before, they're regional. And so what might be applicable for Lake Wiley would not anywhere change what it might happen in Rock Hill. And so to be able to make those
Likes may
minute
be
changes.
universal, but dislikes may be local.
Yes,
That's a pretty fair statement.
yeah.
Any further discussion?
Well, and just to add, realistically, I mean, comprehensive meaning overview for the entire county, unless there were more overlays, you can't really apply all of those
Right.
negatives or positives, quite truthfully, because
And the other thing too is, that's where the land use map kind of refines that. So that's why you might see more higher density in some areas and lower density here. That kind of achieves whatever that nuance between the different parts of the county. So yeah, but without having a zillion overlays, which you can't do that.
Any further questions or comments? All right. All in favor of the motion? All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Any questions or comments on the tracking sheet? All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? All right, we are adjourned.